Yo, that's a lot. Sounds amazing. Pat on the shoulder. Pat on your own shoulder. Job well done. I'm not great with home improvement. I imagine you might have gathered that already. Wow, I have a lot of foodstuffs. What the heck? Should I make another refrigerator? I don't want to constantly bring down this stuff, man. Let's throw... I have too many, full stacks of things. Guess we're not in the... point of needing more inventory space yet. We do not need more corn. What was this? Taters? Oh yeah. Let's grab those taters though. What is this? Tomatoes? Oh, we don't need any more tomatoes. Need to find eggs. That sounds rewarding though, you know? Really rewarding. That's pretty sweet. I learned those practical skills, you know? My compensation is I have a running jeweler's kit. I have a running I guess list of where I could get the most reliable service done for every particular problem. Because my parents have specific upkeep needs for the house. So consider myself well networked. Perhaps one day I'll find some alternative motivations. For acquiring those skills. But the time being, not too high on the priority at the moment. I can't say I naturally surround myself with individuals who are passionate about that type of thing. That's you make what you know, you make do with what you have, you know what I mean? And it's quite rewarding for me. Okay, so here's the deal. This might be an unpopular opinion or maybe an unpopular tendency, but the reason I would probably engage in home improvement is to do it to better appreciate paying someone to do it, or being able to appreciate, to look for how to describe and get someone to do a service that I do not do professionally, but doing it helps me appreciate and look for at least the fundamental understanding of hiring someone to do it, if you know what I mean. So unlike the natural tendency of hey, I know how to do it. Why do I bother paying for it ever again? Kind of thing. You know, the hallmarks of a DUI person, right? That's kind of honestly, that's pretty Americano in a way. I'm quite legitimately the opposite. I like the idea that understanding fundamentals and doing things help me appreciate and help me look out and gauge certain things at a very basic level. But at the same time, it heavily helps me appreciate that there are individuals who have found that what they want, what they do the majority of time are these are refining and iterating on these particular skills I do not. Oh, absolutely. Um, if you're talking to anyone who has reservations about the extent of their expertise, I am one. I'm for the critically minded and the intellectually enlightened. There is such a distinction between spending your life doing something, like a substantial part of your life doing something, and being well informed. Well, the distinction is dramatic. So I cannot emphasize enough that while one can be well informed, perhaps even remarkably intuitive, experience and wisdom on skill sets are invaluable. I know this comes at a cost, right? Because we do, I'm saying invaluable, yet we do have quote unquote a price, a literal price that's associated with this. But, and coming from someone who's not strapped, like, who's a little bit more have the convenience and luxury of that at the exchange of other things, it is great to know that there are people who can do things better than I can. And it's not because I may not be able to, is because of these people who choose to do these things. It alleviates me the responsibility of spending my limited, time to allow me to explore other things, right? I think this perspective, I like to keep reminding myself of this perspective because it takes very little to feel that when you start specializing in higher education or you start specializing in a specific skill, you lose perspective on the idea that your specialized skill is not transferable to other people's specialized skill. So it leads to this bias that you make apples and oranges comparisons, yet and it creates this tendency to dismiss and almost debase uh, quote unquote simple skill that requires a lot of experience to execute. It happens quite a lot. When when you hear, I make $1 million a day off this particular skill, hooray! I pay other people to do mundane tasks. Well, those individuals do tasks you don't do for a living. It, but that comment comes from comparing apples and oranges. The comment comes from reducing someone's worth to an arbitrary metric that favors you. And often it comes down to money, right? The reductive end game to warp someone's perspective is the value system, which is predicated on money, which is a lot easier to visualize and appreciate, but is not the metric, in my opinion, to value someone's worth as a person. They're often invaluable because they do a skill you do not spend your life doing. For example, one of the biggest challenges for someone who's extremely wealthy and make a lot of money is to do a lot of things that you're not being paid for. Can you do that? Well, the answer is no. Why are you comparing apples and oranges? Like, would you do a plumbing job for free for like 3 years to start a business? Right? As someone who's already sitting on top of the world with CEOs and stuff, you don't. So there's value in it. You might be able to say they're undervalued from a business perspective, certainly, but to demean and debase because you lost perspective of jobs you specifically do not want to do, that comes with a warped presentation of success. And that word has plagued dialogues and discussions for a while. It is one of the words that is it's such a deep cut that it hurts to know how much the misunderstanding and misvalue of success hurts people on a daily basis. Like, to the point it invalidates people's lives, or people feel that it invalidates their life. It's hard to ignore the facts that that's how society is now, for sure. Absolutely. I'm not saying believe it and it will become untrue. The truth is that's what creates that perspective. So I'm not talking about what you should and should not do, because the facts are that's how the value system works. How it affects you is most certainly under your control in some way. But yeah, you hear that dialogue all the time. Sometimes you hear with like intelligence and legacy, the prospect of competence. So for example, like, I'm not a competent carpenter, but somehow having a higher education gives me the benefit of the doubt more often to be able to become a competent carpenter. The answer is no. I'm probably still gonna struggle to be a competent carpenter. That kind of thing. I'm worth like 3 puffy Cheetos and like 17 cents? Oof. Let's not quantize someone's worth. Come on. I know you're joking, but even from a joking standpoint, that's a deep cut. It's a deep cut. It's nice if you're like, if it benefits you, right? I can, you know, I don't want to enable people into that perspective, lull them into that perspective. I don't know if I perpetuate that or if it's just understand my own, but there are definitely jobs I'm willing to try and jobs where I'm like, no, we're paying. I agree. And being able to understand that is great. I honestly, the individuals that I'm talking about is, oh, I could do that, but you know what? I'm so successful, I'd rather pay someone to do a job that is not worth my time because they're valued less as a job. They provide less for me. You know, how it creates a debasing, like you create a schism in the importance of things because you grade them towards what serves you. So when I go out and I run every day I get up, right before I get up, and I always see the postal, like the post office dude driving in their truck and putting stuff that, I just wave to them. So thank goodness there's someone that still provides the mail. if you want to do a modern society spin on this, it's like, well, we have email. What's the point of them? Look at that guy spending most of his life using an archaic form of communication. It's like, that's kind of the perspective warp I'm talking about, where if it's not relevant to you, it means whoever's doing it, whoever's job they observe, all of a sudden becomes meaningless or worthless to you. Instead of the other way around, it's like, well, that job still exists. At least someone out there is being served a convenience that's just implied in the system. And it's nice. And they probably enjoy, you know, find some reward aspect that keeps them being a post office person. That's all I'm saying, really. It sounds simple, but sometimes you forget that. And I'm saying, including myself, like humans, when you stop doing certain things, which naturally you don't have time to be a connoisseur of everything, the longer you become detached, the more it's easier to feel apathetic or detached from the experience. And I like to remind myself a lot of times there are many tasks that I am very incompetent. no contest. Very incompetent. And I have no qualms with sharing that. Thinking that I can learn anything, certainly, but I didn't. So just because I have the potential to learn something doesn't mean I have it already. You're comparing yourself to someone who spent, like, if I had to choose, my ego would step aside. Like, maybe I successfully restored a bathroom. The next thing I think about is a plumber with 7 years of experience. Yeah, if I can afford it and show my appreciation in some way that isn't just gonna be unsustainable, I probably get that plumber to make my bathroom next time. One time I learned, there are a lot of reservations and there are a lot of nuances about restoring a bathroom. Time to get an experienced plumber. But I would at least want to do it once, you know, at some point, just to appreciate, like, okay, now this is my baseline for my fundamentals. What does a person who's been doing plumbing work in bathrooms 7 years do? It's like, yo, thank you. I'm happy to see that there are different people in this world that decided to do and refine and iterate on skills that I've only touched upon. I do like to get a little bit dirty to get the experience, the empathy. My skills, though, are often specifically reflective of... Are these herbs? Oh, I don't need any more of these. I need onions. My skills are largely reflective of my company, though. So, I know a lot about automobiles unnecessarily, but it came in handy, which is cool. I unusually had some dipping in train, like locomotive engines. That's a little random one. It was kind of fun. And largely it's because I like to be involved and appreciate, at least on... It's better than zero. Learning to appreciate other people's crafts and life stuff is still better than zero. You know what I mean? Like, zero, you have infinity, you have such an insurmountable gain from just spending a little bit to get closer to someone. It could be an entire stranger. In fact, when I said doing these things have a great network, it's only because I sound very polite. The thing, you might be thinking, okay, well, that sounds like you're just doing something willy-nilly. No, actually, I'm to be pragmatic about it, it also makes me able to convince people to do a wonderful job. And it also gives me the tools to explain exactly in context to demonstrate that I am competent enough to communicate. So what happens often, and my parents typically leave it up for me, right? They have like a customer service complaint, or they have a insurance claim, or a safety thing. Well, I did some of those things in order to at least fundamentally get to and explain to and appeal to the employees, the customer representatives, on how to get what I want from them. It's a very effective thing that you can do with minimum input of time. So like I got someone, it's really easy to get a bone from people, and it vastly doesn't hurt the actual customer representative. It's just taking from the company in a way. By being pleasant or being angry when they're angry, that kind of thing, all these fundamentals create room to make people feel comfortable, and then in the process you get what you want. Or getting called bear and breakfast is lacking. Listen, look, I've already Mazuku, I've already stocked the buffet. Okay, look. Hey, oops, man, this is too close to the staircase, but check it out. Like, this stuff is stocked. Okay, the kitchen's up, the dining room and the kitchen is upstairs, so that they don't interfere with the perception of the. I'm just collecting valuables while these guests finish. I need to build 2 bathrooms in my motel, so I have to demolish one of the rooms to build a bathroom. Wait, it says 2 level 1 bathrooms. Does that mean I have to downgrade my bathroom? Wait, hold up. What if I made 2 level 2 bathrooms? The task did say specifically level 1 bathrooms. I'm waiting for the guests to leave, so I'm just foraging stuff. From my motel. Leaving from my motel. I'm just gathering plywood and stuff. While I'm ranting about stuff, you know? And you know exactly what job you need doing rather than just, can you fix... Yes. And, if you want to, I have a very stark reminder of the narrow-mindedness, like the unempathized things. My father does that a lot, so I handle most of the customer service and the repair communication, because I can get more or less in a. It doesn't sound great the way this is, but I can get the things done. Instead of my father sitting there, it's like, I don't get it. Why can't you fix this? I paid money for this. Why can't you fix this? Like, clearly you're hired to do it. You know, that type of... That doesn't get anywhere, in my opinion. Consistently, that does not help with the transaction. So I handle most of the communication. You can be pleasant. You can be a pleasant customer to expedite the situation, and it comes with also dabbling in many skills. You don't have to find just specifically the value of the skill, like the mechanical use of the skill. You can understand the skill and appreciate the skill, which allows you to communicate properly and to create a common ground that enables people to work better. Like, so, you know, cue the horror stories about waiters spitting in people's food, for example. I worked in the food service and in the kitchen before. And communicating with a waiter, seeing that the waiter is having a terrible time, even before they try to act as professional as possible, while having a terrible day, it can change the world, or it can change at least that person's life momentarily, to be an empathetic customer. And the more you do that, the higher propensity that you would get rewarded. You know, like, that's just the nature of things. It's not to say you do it to expect reciprocation. Is that idea is you're adaptive enough to be that person to increase the odds of it happening. So whenever my father sees like a bill and it increased in price, he's like, he has no idea why it increased in price. He's like, they're probably ripping us off. So I call, inquire about it, not take the perspective of what my father does, which he makes assumptions about how business works and how the bill works, and that somehow he's a targeted person to get ripped off, etc. All the baggage. Just go there calmly, ask, get all the information, and hey, they reduced the bill for 3 months. Great, for my inconvenience. Yep. I get a lot, like, just figuring out how to work around with your communication skills. You can get people to help you quite a bit, even if you don't ask for it. Or people, it's contagious to be very reasonable and be charismatic in conversations. Gotta do that soon. Never look forward to. Yeah, so I want to say it's worth noting that I've been doing this for a while, to the point where it's no longer, it's more like you go through with rehearsal, right, with these things, and you use it as a task to say, hey, I'm going to improve my skill, or this is an opportunity to do that. That's how I got around to being, whenever my father pops in, like, he could pop in at any second. While I'm streaming, he could pop in and he's like, hey, you need to make a call for this. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. Stream goes off, 15 minutes, solve the problem. Even if it doesn't solve the problem, maybe it takes 3 months, 4 months, it still keeps going. And eventually, like, hey, thanks for being patient. We got the thing done. Sorry for the inconvenience. Here's some free stuff. Oh, instead, let's just give you some credit for your inconvenience. You were very understanding. I can't tell you how often that happens. It actually happens more frequently than having a terrible customer service experience. I actually talked to a customer service and talked to them about their family, because they were clearly working remotely on vacation with their family. So he's like, oh, excuse me, I have something. So, like, you can hear their children in the background, or like some family members, young family members in the background. I was like, that's okay, take your time. I'm calling from holiday as well. It's unfortunate that this timing happens, right? And eventually it became a casual conversation. And then we got the thing done, and, I got a little extra on the side for like coupons and discounts and whatnot. Now, I'm not saying, I do have to fair warn, I think individuals who think they're charismatic, who does it for a different purpose, like manipulating or for selfish, in my opinion, tends to make them narrow-minded enough that they aren't as proficient. I mean, I'm going to say this with as humbly as I can. Individuals who do not focus on what serves them tends to have a more eclectic approach to being charismatic. However, those individuals, thankfully, because of their more breadth of motivations, they tend to be more understanding that using that type of skill and intuition to manipulate people is exploitation. So a lot of times when there are people who come up to me and say, oh, this is exploiting, this is wrong, but I don't exploit, or I can exploit whenever I want to. Likely the case, that's not a person who has command of communication skills or empathy or charisma in general. In order to get to that state of perspective, you are already eliminating anyone who's disagreeable to you. So those people inherently are less charismatic. Even though they may get what they want, the individuals who are truly charismatic are the ones that wouldn't participate in that type of behavior, because the inherent nature of saying you're charismatic, concerning about how people think you're charismatic, or qualifying yourself is not something who is inherently charismatic would prioritize. They don't introduce themselves as, hey, I'm a better man, I'm a better person because I choose the high road to do things. I choose a morally non-exploitive. I don't take shortcuts. Those individuals will suffer from being charismatic. It's a paradox. Someone who's great at a skill tend to, not just communication, someone who's excellent at a skill tends to not be the one focused on telling people they are exceptional at the skill unless ask, because they live by example. It's not their concern. They don't necessarily even worry about not doing an adequate job. They're largely focused on doing the job, which includes communication skills. So you will not find me ever saying, even remotely, that I consider myself charismatic enough. I don't ever think my communication skill is good enough for my own standards. I am constantly trying to improve it. If you are truly a person who likes to specialize in something, you don't focus on people's projections of how specialized you are. You tend to already be caught up in the skill anyways. And whenever someone compliments you, ironically, this makes you less charismatic, but typically the individuals who are highly specialized reject compliments specifically to their specialized skill, because the more information they get about their skill, the more likely they find that the standards continue to be above where they currently are, which is kind of like a really unfortunate, it's a trade-off. Like, you become more dissatisfied with your competence, but at the same time, the baseline quality of your skill set is well beyond extraordinary. It leads to something called the imposter syndrome, where you go around and say, oh, I'm not that great, and yet you're in the 99th percentile, and it could, individuals who are not like charismatic in general, not inclined, it can be a detriment to your surrounding cohesive communication skills and your immediate work environment. Imposter syndrome is something that can be very off-putting in a team-oriented situation, but since you spent most of your time specializing, generally speaking, you don't have to be a team player. It's not a skill set you emphasize. So it does, unless you specialize in communication, it's most of everything, you have a higher chance of losing out on communication skills and charismatic, because it's inherently intrinsic to people who are experts at things. They don't have much time to consider other things. They're specializing. I'm gonna blow my nose 1 second. That makes you a specialist, though. So, like, you have the communication skills that are appropriate to maintain your quality of life and your perception of success. The stuff that I'm talking about is when a person has dissonance with the dissatisfaction of themselves and what they're doing for it. So it sounds like you know how much communication skills are appropriate to make yourself feel successful. Others would say, I don't get it. I don't understand why I don't get recognized for this and that. That's a different story, right? For me, I've stopped specializing in certain things, but I think I choose to specialize in a skill that has no visible representation. So it's very difficult to demonstrate. Like, the last thing you want to do is try to convince somebody with like 30 minutes that your specialized skill is communication. Like, can you really do that in 30 minutes? There is a fairly popular persona that is, but that person tours. It's a summation of their, like, I don't have a craft, right? I don't have anything visibly sensational. That also is the main obstacle for scientists. Like, what do? What can visibly determine on impression that, hey, you're a great critical thinker? How do you demonstrate that? How do you demonstrate that without spending months with the same person in order to evaluate? So when it comes to the internet, you know, right now, short format was the first trend. So short formats tend to be about skills that are visually intuitive or conventionally intuitive. You know, like you can show a picture of it. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's unfair or like one is higher value. The medium initially in human prospects, when you have sharing things, the more senses you can intuit, the more visibly impressionable it is. Like the visually, as in like the mind's eye, or literally presentable. So for now, our baby internet is revolving around these things. And it's the biggest uptrend now are skills and long takes that are about things that are very difficult to grasp. And, you know, that's how school started. You start with the simple crafts and they're simple crafts, but most skills are difficult to master. So just because something is simple doesn't make it less in value. Much like someone who can do a plumbing job that I couldn't ever do, right? I mean, even lifting things. I prefer not to be lifting 100-pound objects. Someone else, I absolutely appreciate that there are individuals who can lift 100-pound objects on a daily basis for like hours. Thank you. That's what I like to say. Like, simplicity and complexity has a double standard for it. Without saying like being too direct, simplicity and complexity warps people's value systems, especially in people who are incompetent. And when I mean by incompetent, I mean individuals who have not participated in the skill they're criticizing. They're very bold statements. I mean, I could see and understand how they would come to that conclusion. However, that is still a demonstration of incompetence. As incompetence goes up, it's more and more likely that an individual undervalues everything, like things that are not a property of themselves, because it's difficult to empathize and connect emotionally to something you don't actually do. So inherently, it's not right or wrong. It's a very rational way of approaching and protecting self, to be honest. Like, those individuals would have a high value of perceived self. I don't necessarily have that. It takes away every time you concern yourself more with others, you inherently will take value away from yourself, right? So it's a balance. It has to meet your goals and needs. Statements for replacement, but it is. That's why indirect hold to things where it is, but they also make it so that there's no clarity. Intellectuals as a trade-off tend to be nebulous. Most of their problem solvings tend to slow down. They're less efficient. It's difficult for a biological organism to constantly take in more and more considerations and more factors. So at some point, an intellectual has to understand, hey, priorities, let's make snap decisions when it's appropriate, kind of thing. But then they have to wrestle with the idea of feeling incompetent or making gut decisions or taking a gamble, hyping something, believing in something, being encouraging, all that emotional intelligence. It fades from a lack of practice. Intellectuals, in my opinion, trade that off for being well informed and consistent. But since they don't practice emotional intelligence, they often fail in that light. And there are wonderful, prominent people who use that as like they excuse it. They don't acknowledge and take responsibility for it. They simply say, I know the truth, so therefore I'm not held to the same emotional standards as someone who don't know the truth or the likely truth. This happens with some very prominent figures, and I emotionally disagree with them. Even though professionally we can probably and intellectually come to agree on what is true. Like, I absolutely agree with most of these particular controversial people on most of their objective points. Come to the same conclusion, no argument there. But their lack of emotional intelligence is where I stop. It hits a flat, like, because the emotional intelligence will shape how they interpret their contribution and what their solution are. Like, it dramatically affects their solutions. Like, for example, someone's overweight. Well, you clearly lack self-control. That's the highest probability. You lack self-control. So what do? Get control. Start by doing something that empowers a habit that works towards losing weight. Like that type of thing. Like, okay, it can work for quite a subset of people, but due to the lack of emotional intelligence, you're not phrasing or suggesting solutions based on the mental state of that individual, the likelihood of the mental state of that person, right? And the person who's emotionally intelligent probably would slow down, right? It would take them longer. Besides, hey, I trust this intellectual, they're completely objective, I'll follow them, right? Just do it. And they could end up solving and becoming less overweight quicker. However, it could also backfire and that person would be completely unreceptive. So it's a big gamble. So when you specialize in being an intellectual, you are also losing practice in emotional intelligence. And funny enough, that's how intellectuals become viral sensations. When someone, we're still in the phase of the internet where specialized personalities are the most sensational things, and they tend to be celebrated. They tend to be very emotionally distraught. So I was looking through like what type of intellectuals now are being perceived, because Fictitious shared a video yesterday and it led me down a rabbit hole, and most of those intellectuals are exceptionally biased. Not saying they're bad people or good people or whatever, they are exceptionally efficient at a very specific thing they do, applying their critical thinking. They're not generalists, so there's no balance or anything. They're absurdly in balance, but they are also incredibly intelligent, fast, quick, because they specialize in it. And yeah, I don't desire that. It's a point of disagreement. Every time Every time I watch a video for them so far, it's like, oh yeah, those are all the facts. I agree, I agree, I agree. And then suddenly this person says something like, I'm not trying to be this. It's the truth. My whole goal is to spread the truth. You know, that's all I care about. It's like, that's fair. Absolutely fair. That's not all I care about. That's where the disagreement starts, right? It's a approach. What I care about is the perception of the other person. These individuals are projectors. They are disagreeable because they are specialists. And in fact, it's really comical because some of these people give lectures specifically to acknowledge that they are that type of person. So they are clearly self-aware of what they're doing. They prefer to be efficient intellectuals, like extremely efficient, sharp, direct. And I am not one of those people. And there's no representation for those intellectuals. Like, that's not popular right now. For the time being, there's no trend. You won't find intellectuals who are viral that are indirect or just mumbling and ranting. And when you listen to one of their YouTube videos, it's like, wait, hold. You just spent 3 hours making one point, and then you spend the next 3 hours counterpointing that point. So where are you going with this? And typically, an intellectual of that nature tends to sound like very overwhelming and no clear answers. So we're not in that phase of the internet yet. We have not established enough standards of conventional knowledge yet. Perhaps in the future, the nuances of complexity would be better appreciated. Not saying it's for better or for worse. It's just that perspective is not represented. That's the facts are, if I talk to this direct intellectual, it's like, I'm sure this person can compromise to agree that yes, and they would probably direct at me and say, that's because it's inefficient for now, for the current modern society. If I understand that the current modern society is more receptive to the generalist approach of emotional intelligence combined with intellectual critical thinking, then I would adapt my strategy to it. And I'm like, fair enough. That's a compromise. It's a very pragmatic way of saying it, and I would agree. Your current strategy is clearly more appropriate for the current society. Will society change and trend to something else? It's outside my field of expertise, right? I can't make predicting human like social changes and trends are like asking someone like me to have a mental breakdown. Because that's too complex. It's far too dynamic. So for someone like myself, I compromise on saying, we'll see what happens. You just adapt. You think they're popular then because people like being told? Yes. Right now, the current society, the trend is that removing complexity and inherently trusting someone who have demonstrated their credibility, however they do it, be it I have a PhD, be it I worked in a field for 10 years, enough to sustain the trust, and then being concise about it without dealing with the nuances is far more attractive, is far more efficient. Efficiency. It's if you look up the phrase that describes the current phase of modern society on the internet, is the hustle culture. The hustle culture is not fading yet. It's kind of stagnating. The hustle culture is stagnating because now the consequences of hustle culture is being evaluated. Like, it's been 4 or 5 years since that culture has been trending. So things are slowing down. It's like, oh, hey, it's creating burnout. It's creating all these things that are consistently and statistically likely to happen without a doubt, right? So it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, now let's slow down. Let's start focusing on something that hauls people down, create less urgency, create less conditional compliance is what I'm going to call it. Basically, hey, you're not doing this like 3 million other people. Are you sure you don't want to change your mind there? Because if 3 million people are doing this, they've got to be right. Yeah? And then the next day, it's like, oh, those same 3 million, they stopped doing that stuff. Now they're doing this thing. Like, are you on the ball or something? Like, you have yesterday's news, right? And it highlights pretty much all of content creation at the moment, which is a large majority of the internet. So if you're not part of the hustle culture, you're behind. It's changing now. The landscape is changing. What's uptrending and pacing now is what people deem as genuine content, which I don't like. I cannot agree with that terminology, but the idea is sound. The classification is sound, which is genuine content means novelty. And novelty in terms of personalized content. It's no longer the hustle culture of being on brand, being on trend. Genuine content, personalized content is on the rise, and it's to the point where it might actually be outpacing the hustle culture, which is based on popularity and mere exposure. So nowadays, it's like, oh man, this guy is very, very disagreeable. Like, but you know what? No one else is doing it. That's kind of neat, because you've seen the other things now. Now the trend culture, so you've seen one, your expectation has leveled to the point like, hey, this is popular. I bet there are 10 other outlets. It's like, well, all right, well, now we've done it for like 4 or 5 years. It's kind of, let's move on to the next trend. Break the hustle culture. So what I said before, like 2 years ago or a year ago about Twitch and being a content streamer, like streaming games, like niche games, how like Bear and Breakfast is going to ever make it on exposure on a Twitch platform, those things are becoming irrelevant. So now, in the next year or two, my dialogue would change. It would be, hey, yeah, actually, there's a market for specialized talent now. There's a market for specialized content creator. In fact, you might want to start now in anticipation that the trend might take hold. So make specialized content. But you have to understand, you have to wait for the trend to happen. Like, wait for the wave to happen. The idea to be a leader or be super breakout success is to be ahead of the trend. So if I had a hot take, the thing that I used to be discouraging about specializing and like spending 3 years basically making content that no one really finds trending or viral or popular, that might be the future. That's a trend where, hey, I'm gonna go out of my way to look at anti-algorithm, less popular things, because I want to know the stuff that I'm not bored of now, which is all the stuff that's really popular right now. So it's established that status quo. Now it's to the point where people will go out of their way to find something different. And that works to the benefit of the current generation who still believes in a dream for specialized skills. Because now you can probably knit the Mona Lisa right now and wait a year or two, and someone's going to discover your live stream of knitting the Mona Lisa, and that's just going to take off just on that one video. And then this person realized, oh, you didn't only knit the Mona Lisa, you actually underwater basket weave the Mona Lisa too. That kind of thing. So if I had a hot take, simplification, ease, and efficiency comes first. It's repeatable in human history. You start with simplicity to become efficient, and that simplicity becomes very specialized. The simplicity, the manufacturing thing. And as a resistance, right, humans get super overzealous. And then they overcompensate by looking for the others. Eventually, I drew this graph with a waving line that eventually kind of like the ups and downs will get refined. And that's why I call the standardization of human interest. It'll be standardized. Contrary to what another person said, someone else dropped in on my conversation about I'm giving the internet like another 3 years or so where there's gonna be some standardization of the highs and lows between trends are gonna coalesce a little bit. So it'll be a little bit more consistent. And that's what I call standardization of monetized content creation. Not what that other person dropped in. They thought I was talking about censorship and like appropriateness, and then they brought up pornography briefly. I'm saying that's bureaucrats. Of course, that's going to be an ever battle to like 3 decades down the road. But I'm talking about the speed of the internet, the standardization of trend creation. Once you get to that state where novelty is the thing, that's just the end game. You no longer like, that's it. Everything has become unique. So it's very difficult when how do you standardize novelty? You don't. You just keep evolving from novelty until the next like wave of something that shapes the planet or society. Another internet like revolution or something, like something that has just as a big influence as the internet. Or coffee. Coffee is a great example. Before the internet, it was coffee. I just think about how modern society, whether you choose to drink coffee or not, it's undisputedly undeniable that coffee was the revolution before internet. Just like you just look at how the modern internet, like first coffee was simple, right? Instant coffee, shoot it, you got it. But now what is it? It's a anything novelty thing. How do we put caffeine in as many novelty ways to separate ourselves from the competition? Sports drinks, formulated content influencer backed caffeination, refinements like nutritional caffeinated beverages. So now it's just it's no ups and downs anymore. It's just like very consistent. What else can we put caffeine in that can offset what coffee has introduced in modern society? You can pick a lot of these pieces. They tend to start simple, then the nuance sets in. So I think in terms of content creation, that is it too. Just a fair digression into like, what would I call this? I guess the initial generalist favoritism, and then going through cycles of what is a great time to be a specialized person and what is an optimal time to be a generalist person. When standards are not met, right? When standards are being established, it is often favoring someone who has a generalist perspective, like myself. When things get settled and then the standards are set, then it comes to the specialist people who break from the standard, because now you have a baseline. Everything's like, things are going to be compared to a standard. Right now, when you see someone love to count to 1 million like Mr. Beast every single day on a live stream, that's not as exciting, because people have determined it's not exciting, right? It's not simple. It's not engaging, determined by the populace. In the future, it's like, dude, all these people using calculators because it's the most efficient way. Dude, did you see this guy? This guy counted to 1 million, even better than Mr. Beast. Like, subscribe, and see more crazy things by this person. because you're looking for novelty at this point. We're not. I personally don't. I think we're like 3 years off that, just based on the pace of how the internet moves. I would have said 6 or 7 years, maybe even 10 years, if it wasn't considering how fast things turn over on the internet. It's not like yo-yos. It's not like scooters. You know, it's not something that has to diffuse slowly, and the fastest way is like television. But television is on a set schedule. The mere exposure of television ads and stuff are limited by their timetable. The internet is not. The internet is legit. You can just be bombarded and you have no idea. So that communication of that stuff, the like going through the cycle of sensitizing and desensitizing something, is rapid. It's almost, I was being conservative. It's double the pace. I'm going to give it 3 years. There's going to be a standardization, and then in the future, the trend that goes up is everything outside the standard. As many ways as people can depart from standardization, which is what makes sports interesting to look. When people watch sports, they look for the outliers now. Yeah, sure, consistency is the game that wins most of the, win most of the games. Like teams that are most consistent ends up consistently winning. But the person making the most splash and sensation are those who stick out from standardization. And I just watched a slew of people, like for example, Ronaldo. If you're not into soccer or football, at least you know who I'm talking about. That person is a specialist. They're not a generalist. They're not an all-around MVP. But what they do creates massive sensation. Massive. Like, this person is an outlier in their skill. And even if you don't really want that to be the representative, that's what happens when you're in a mature platform. Well, I'm gonna call it a platform because I want to relate it to like Twitch streaming and this game. The platform, once it becomes standardized, it leaves room for saying, for the most people, like, oh, that's different. That's very different. I like it. Like, that is not as boring as seeing the 100 things upholding the status quo. Jobs are the same. The most people that are doing the labor are not the ones that are sticking out. Hey, how did plumbing become mundane? Well, at one point it was new. Plumbing was unheard of. Only a few people know how to do plumbing, right? And then eventually it's just like, oh, okay, well, now everyone can do it. We know what the baseline is. Well, if I pay someone, they have to at least baseline do this. But suddenly there's this like super rock star plumber that just happened to meet you, and they like went above and beyond. It's like, dude, start a YouTube channel, please. I want to see your magnificent craftsmanship. That's kind of where we're, in my opinion, that's the most likely trend heading. So it's a shame though, if you're right now and you're asking yourself, you want to be a content creator, right? You have to create content for, I'm going to say conservative, 3 years with no reception, no feedback, people who think you're wasting your time, and then ride the trend up. Prepare content for the rising trend of boredom and normalization and standardization. Prepare to stick out from normalization and standardization. There's a really big catch though. If you end up specializing in something that is trending now, or just by happens, you're only going to get the feedback of that trend, and then that trend will basically dwarf the value of it when human behavior trends away from it. So if you are popular now, the skills you have now that you're developing to best milk you know, seize the opportunity, those skills will become irrelevant for popularity later. Because it's been done. Things that have been done. Eventually, it'll cycle back. In the entertainment industry, it has already cycled back. How do you do it? Introduce things for a new generation. Another new generation of humans, another new wave of recycling and maybe slightly better and more inclusive, what have you, but remake all that other stuff. So what is TikTok? It's the second coming of Vine. It's already happened a couple of times. the cycling of methods has come full circle a bunch of times already. That's how fast the internet moves. One generation is like 10 years. It used to be like 30 or 40 years, you know, when people become mid-adults, that would be the generation of creativity, right? The cycling. But you know what? Gen Alpha already exists. Time to recycle. Start overlapping and recycling in for exposing Gen Alpha to what you exposed Gen Z to. So there's still that. It's just not as upfront as the bigger trends, because I'm comparing and contrasting bigger trends and smaller trends. That's like apples and oranges. What it means though is that as the internet evolves, there will be more and more inclusion of specific things that people can do. And hopefully that standardization gives individuals who work hard a bottom line, which is what other careers have. Other occupations have a bottom line. If you are sufficient in achieving the task, somewhere out there may be a demand for it, right? There's enough demand. Right now, what is the content creator's bottom line? Well, sleeping on stream for 24/7 to high-strung 72 straight hour subathons. There's no standard. Like, the bottom's the bottom. What is the bottom of TikTok? Reposting every other TikTok. Verbatim. Legit just reposting other people's content. That's the bottom. And in the top, what is the top? Risking your life for TikTok. so there's no, yeah, there's still a lot of standardization happening because you don't have a bottom line. The bottom line is legitimately hitting 3 buttons. And then the top of the line is, I might not be alive tomorrow to make another clip. That's like, oh, where do you stop? So eventually, I would like to say there's a bottom line, and that comes with standardization. Big digression, but you know, definitely worth it. We'll add this to the deep digression pool of videos. I've been meaning to collect a bunch of these digressions so I can like maybe do a formal write-up or something just for fun. Practice my writing skills. Just a little bit of a lot. I think that should be my catchphrase in the future. A little bit of a lot. Just that what I just said is probably my version of hot take. That was a hot take. It would probably take another 24 hours to explain the long cut. And it would be less rushed. I would probably try to decompose it, make a web, connect the logic, lay it out, maybe an outline style. It's probably a web style, like one logic leads to another, how they converge, how they antagonize each other, and then have other people like contribute alternative things. Okay, so while we were waiting, things got completed, which is great because I needed to wait for these things. So we have to go to Timber Crossing. Did it sound like I gave an exact impression of things? No, not really. Like, the future could be completely different. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not that bold. I will inherently continue to discredit my own boldness. If it happens to be right, it gives me some semblance of... It doesn't really impact my self-esteem or anything. There's nothing in it for me to be right, to be honest. If it saves someone's lives, that's the most I can ask for. If it turns someone's life around, even one person, that's enough. I have not met that before. Like, I think I would probably break down in tears if I see someone like 20 or 30 years down the line and said that I changed their lives. That would probably legitimately make the most for one of the most fulfilling things in my life. Which I do have people who I've mentored and taught in a way, but it's only been like 3 or 4 years, so it's not really that long. But legitimately, that would probably make me... I would die happy knowing that. What did I get from that? Do I get schematics? Yo, what are these progressions? Do I just get money? Get +5, +10 5-star reviews, but I already have that, right? Is this autocomplete? I'm pretty sure I have to get 10 more? Dude, that takes like 10 days, 10 game days. I only have 2 rooms. All right, fine, whatever. I already have 18 perfect reviews, dude. Oh, and this kind of triggers me. I'm such a micromanager, so the first review is guaranteed not to be perfect because of the tutorial. Or at least, like, if it's the first time playing. So I have 1 non-5-star review. Oh, actually, there might be 2. And it's the first one because you have to gain access to it. Curses. Alright, so we want to get the most picky people. There we go. Analyzing how you explain your thoughts with logic, etc. Not a skill I knew I needed, but I think that's something I'm going to look into. It's wonderful. Like, you can be... I'm gonna say, if you're still... Alright, I'm not talking... This won't resonate to older people. Maybe their wisdom has compensated for it. But if you're in your, like, 30s, it's an investment in your future. You can get... This is gonna sound manipulative, but it will make it so much easier for you to get things done. Not specifically just you. You can get people to get things done. For themselves, for yourself, to help you, to have them help other people. That is priceless. So it gives you the flexibility. The reason why I love this is because I dislike feeling helpless. I dislike seeing someone who maybe, like, they tripped and then they suddenly, like, looked at you. It's like, do they want my help? Maybe they don't want my help? That feeling of helplessness, like, oh, I don't know enough. I can't quite get with the program. This person needs to volunteer. It's like, I want to erase that gap. So I want to be able to read people. That's the entire goal. And that sounds like, oh yeah, that's very narcissistic and stuff. So I'm not going to say I'm going to be successful at it. I want to. So it keeps me motivated. It drives me to constantly be all up in people's business indirectly, observing people. I want to reduce the barrier of feeling like I can't be relevant to someone. And not meaning relevant to millions of people. One person. The person that trusts you. The person that's just looking for a bone. The person that might be in the gutter. I'm biased towards like individuals who seem like they're way out of their depth and they cannot break loops. I want to be the person that can offer that to them without even them asking. But the thing is, in the back of my head, I don't want to get involved because I don't think I'm competent enough to do so. And that is the constant driver for me to continue doing this. And it makes pretty much everything trivial, in my opinion. Like, what I mean trivial is there's no barrier that stops me from wanting to do it. Why do I want to learn how to knit? It doesn't matter. Someone else is knitting, and I could help someone to learn how to knit. It doesn't matter if I don't know how important it is right now. I do it because it exists. Someone else does this because it exists. Things that exist now is intrinsically interesting. Trade-off, I get disinterested in things that I've already been interested in. So that's a really big trade-off. Novelty starts climbing up, right? Because you're focused on how much you can gain in the most limited amount of time. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about your self-satisfaction. So yeah, I won't be consistent that way. When I do plumbing once, it's very unlikely for me to return to plumbing unless I've been introduced to someone in plumbing. So I'm basically avoiding the burnout situation. Do I get into something, I go hard till I'm burnt out on it? Yeah. So I'm avoiding the burnout situation. I have artificially, maybe, is it considered art? I have naturally, I guess, avoided myself to say, I need a cutoff. Otherwise, I'm just going to consistently go through a cycle of burning out and not burning out, and then burning out and then recovering from that. Eventually be run down to the ground and tapped out. And then I'll be this grumpy 60, 70-year-old man like, hey, back in my day, I had to learn all these skills and like get through and suck it up or something. I can see myself becoming that dated. So I'm preventing myself from doing that. I do not burn myself out because I'm novelty seeking. I have convinced myself, some people might see it as being self-delusional or like trying to gaslight self, but in this case, it has improved my quality of life. So yay for gaslighting myself if that's how you want to interpret it. It is a very valid way of saying it or interpreting it. However, I circumvent burning out. I stop eventually. It meets a criteria that gives me self-satisfaction and it maximizes self-satisfaction. Starting over, not even a problem. It's not even a negative thing. Starting fresh, being terrible at something, always thinking that I'm incompetent. It's refreshing. When I feel incompetent, I feel like I'm in the zone. I have found something that I can gain the opportunity to get massive rewards for like one day of trying. That's something that I've never considered stopping the burnout. I just figured out that's fair. I mean, you have to ask yourself, like, if you're burning out, you have to ask yourself, are you used to it? Does it take too much? Does it take anything from your life, right? For me, the answer was a resounding yes. I just got to stop. I burned out on science. Without a doubt, over 3.5 years ago, I could not cut it because if candles had 4 ends, I was burning at 4 ends. I wasn't burning at both ends of a candle. This candle was thrown into a bonfire. And somehow I tried to make that bonfire live for like 7 years over my PhD. so it's not for me. It's the harshest lesson I've learned, that I have this unrelenting burnout potential. So not happening. It's like not happening. I don't want to repeat that. It was the lowest point in my life. And at that time, I'm only saying it was the lowest point in my life in retrospect. I thought I was living on cloud 9 when that was happening, because that's what happens in burnout. You burning so furiously you can't even see that you're declining. You're just imploding at some point. I'm usually having negative except my back. That's fair. So it sounds like you don't have to. You don't. It makes reasonable. It checks out that you haven't considered stopping the burnout because it's not motivating you strongly enough to feel too much about it. You strike me as a proactive person. A passive person could be like suffering incredibly and they wouldn't do anything about it. That's the dangers, right? So you strike me as a very healthy person. So if it's not impacting you greatly negatively, you're not moved to change anything about it. And that's fair. That's actually very pragmatic. Constantly doing new things like I'm doing, it requires a catalyst of effort, right? Keep doing the pattern you already have doesn't have that input. But here's the catch. I've done this so many times. That catalytic energy of effort that I need to place in has become so low that I don't even feel that that's negative anymore. In fact, my mindset is, oh, hey, look, it's something else I'm terrible at. I've hit the jackpot. I can spend 30 days working on this skill and it will give tremendous dividends versus spending 30 days on something I already know how to do. Like I would get better at that thing, but compared to 30 days of something that I have no idea what to do, it's immeasurable. It's inconceivable that you cannot gain more from 30 days of something you're completely new at versus something you spent 14 years doing. It's not to say I didn't consider that. Actually, when I'm learning new things, I have decided to specialize in something that anytime I learn a new skill, that feeds back on the skill I've specialized in. So anything I do is relevant to the skill I spent 14 to 15 years cultivating, which is teaching, instructing, and communicating. That is the reason I got into science. That's the reason I went to school. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to have something worth sharing. So now I've lowered the barrier, prevented burnout, lowered the barrier to keep starting new things, which makes it easier to prevent burnout. And everything I do is something I can spin to rehearse for my primary skill. That's it. Critical thinking. That's the skill. I can make myself, the challenge is to constantly make myself more and more charismatic and agreeable. And I'll take that to the end of days. You'll never know. I might be that trendy dude with a VR headset walking out in the door and I'm like 70 years old. Or that dude that's masquerading as sort of online characters. I'll just go. I'm not even a millennial anymore. I'm closer to a Gen Z than I am a millennial. I'm continuously being fluid because you just gotta keep going. There are more people with a certain mindset. That's where I'm going. That's it. That's kind of cool. Such a koala for obtaining. I'm a little amused, but I also understand that yes, you have to understand the drawbacks. Absolutely. The most empowering thing one can do about self-worth, like if you're questioning your actions, if you can talk about all the drawbacks and you can still find, if the person you're talking to still finds has all the drawbacks, you have this demeanor that communicates that, yeah, you still sound like you love this and you still do this and I'm interested. That's when you know there aren't really drawbacks to your perception of your own choices. So when I'm talking about the drawbacks, I have no problem starting with drawbacks, because those are the drawbacks I'm willing to trade. I'm most definitely and comfortably willing to trade those things for the stuff I gain from my perception. I don't want to be a master. I don't want, like, okay, I do want to be a master. I don't need for it to be a master, because what I given up for mastery greatly enhances my happiness and my ability to be successful the way I am. I prefer to be proficient at 5 skills in exchange of 1 skill. That's makes me exponentially happier as a person. So if you can say, yeah, no, you're right, I'm never going to be better at this at a single task than this person who chose to dedicate their life, perfectly fine. When I went to graduate school, even though I tried to get I got into one of the top universities, I didn't see myself as the top university. I saw myself as someone who's trying to milk everything from that experience. That's it. I was trying to take as many things. What does that do? It actually made me a terrible PhD candidate. Like an absolute terrible PhD candidate. There was a silver lining. The department I was part of encouraged multidisciplinary things, because we are shifting away from specialized scientific discipline. Like, chemists are no longer just chemists. Biologists are no longer just biology, because the complexity of the stuff has moved beyond the simple phase. I mean, it only took it took over 200 years or so to get to this point, because it moves at a different pace, right? Discovery doesn't move at the pace of the internet or technology or AI or machine learning, etc. Even though machine learning is actually part of the interdisciplinary science now, it's gotten to the point where yeah, we can't cut it anymore. You can't be a specialist to be profound enough to create novel discoveries. So it was really near kind of the halfway point of my PhD. So then I started hitting that, great. So you mean I can go and get teaching scholarships while focusing on my research and stuff? It was a transition period, but it worked to my advantage. It also is the reason I burned out, though. So just juggling a billion things, like juggling mentoring an undergrad. I thought I could mentor an undergrad, take care of all the lab things as a temp postdoc, and then still go after teaching fellowships so I can transition into undergrad university, all that stuff, and maybe even somehow get a research grant, all that at once. That's just my mind blew up. I couldn't handle it. I was so way over my depth. It was unreal. So yeah, now I'm just trying to moderate. I have to moderate myself, much like this discussion. I'm trying to also not digress too far. But it's when people say life is too short, I don't think I can resonate with what they mean by life is too short. It's inconceivable how I feel about the length of my youth and my adulthood, but you gotta seize the opportunity. Whenever one thing that I just can't process and stop, when someone says, oh yeah, don't worry about it, don't worry about me, it's not worth your time. It's like, yes it is. I mean, you might not be told that by many people because of the hustle culture, because the hustle culture determines what is important and what is worth time, but you're talking to someone who's not part of the hustle culture. I know the percentage. This is unlikely. I'm like, what percentage of content creator don't want to turn content creation into their career? Probably 1%. or less. And I'm one of them. So, yes, I should remind myself that. And welcome. You asked me a question. You are here now. Certainly your time is worth it for me. If you believe in that, you're not worth a stranger's time. You have met a stranger that would value a stranger's time over their own. That's probably... I don't know if that will ever be trendy. I think that's highly impractical. Definitely a biological disadvantage. Significantly impair one's fitness. And absolutely demolishes any semblance of personal relationships. Those are the consequences. Those are the drawbacks. I am most unequivocally going to probably die alone. That's the drawback. And I said that with absolute no regrets. I have no remorse about what I just said. Like, I know my odds. The idea of someone with my personality or what I've chosen to do, no, I'm not sad about it. So you have to choose what you're willing to sacrifice. The person that I was referring to, like some of those speakers, they use this same perspective of accepting the drawbacks to define other things. Like, for example, the touchy question about why so many females, right? The gender gap, for example. So many females, they did super brilliant in elementary school, middle school, high school, then college. And you know what? Yeah, all the performances are either on par when separated by the gender gap, like on par with males. They land and they become CEOs by 30. And then all of a sudden, when it got to 30, got later, all of them stopped. So what is that? What happened there? Clearly, there's no distinction in potential. Like, yeah, for sure. If not even quite better because of the complacency of standardization. So, the gender gap females have to work over the complacency, right? The favoritism. So that little extra bump makes them perform better, but the potential is still relatively significantly the same. So equity, etc. That's the narrative you want to perpetrate. But what I mean, like, show, which is still true. It's most definitely true. But what is also true is males continue to hold those positions, and females just didn't. So what is happening in actuality? Well, here's what a 30-year-old CEO sounds like. 60-hour work weeks, maybe 60 to 70-hour work weeks, always away, no time for association, no time for emotional exchange, socializing, personal life. Who is smarter in this situation? Who's more competent in this situation in terms of self-interest? Let's just think about that for a moment. I actually think if one way to interpret someone with emotional intelligence is that, yeah, they made it, they proved their point, and they also left before because they value something else more than being a successful CEO that works 60 to 70 hours and trying to close the social average, right? And it's also, you can also view it in a turn of phrase. What are the males doing? Oh, they decide to choose a single life of being top G, I guess. Sorry, I adopted a phrase because I've been watching too many controversial people. The whole phrase of top G. So yeah, what are they sacrificing? What are their drawbacks? Well, there are quite some compromises. So yeah, you can still interpret it in that way. Is it what's like subjectively happening? That's hard to tell. it is a very nice narrative that also explains what the facts are. And then there are other narratives like society forcing maternal leave, and yeah, there are other ways to interpret this stuff. But it's also, it doesn't deny the fact that if you want to be those people, you give up things. And for me, I basically give up. Someone is talking about the other day, like, why are they giving up? They don't want to give up the thing that they love or something to be a little bit more professional and whatnot. I give up knowing that I would probably be single for the rest of my life. So what would you give up for something? Is it worth it? So do my skills represent that cost and value to you? Yes and no, probably. So that's just what you're willing to give up for things that you may or may not want. I certainly know what I want by the age of 35. So, and the things that I thought I wanted, or maybe still want in some way, well, they're in moderation now, I guess. Yeah. So I'm not the one that's struggling with reality, I guess. And I feel like I go out of my way to try to get to that for other people. At least those people who feel like their wants and needs and actions are not coinciding with their goals, if you know what I mean. So those are the individuals I do feel it's difficult to reach out with help when they're so occupied with themselves, because they're in danger alert. They're in SOS. So they're locked in this self battle. Expecting them to ask for help is almost unreasonable. If you're in a interlocked 24/7 battle with yourself, how can an intellectual feel compelled, pragmatically speaking, hey, the quickest way to solve that problem is to stop doing that? That would be the pragmatic, like, cold-hearted way, exercising zero emotional intelligence. That it is largely the most pragmatic solution. However, I don't think that's gonna get you there. And intellectuals can also excuse themselves if they lack emotional intelligence to say that, well, it's facts. Those are objectively true. So therefore, you can't get at me for that. And it bleeds into incompetence and conventional knowledge too. Like, hey, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but you really suck. Like, the truth is you suck. Hey, don't hate me because I'm telling the truth. It's like, well, you're a jerk and telling the truth. Any emotionally intelligent person could define that. I said it with a bit of arrogance. I'm going to say individuals with sufficient level of emotional intelligence can see that you can be both. Truth doesn't exonerate someone from being a jerk. So, and sometimes you can see it. You can see the microaggression of people who are pious and above, even for intellectuals. Like, I know unequivocally these are the facts. I've read the books. I've memorized the primary literature. So therefore, you do not question my validity. It's like, you're not exercising emotional intelligence. That would be my retort. But I would be, if I were to do that without an explanation, I would be committing the exact same credibility issue, right? Oh yeah, I exercise emotional intelligence, so it gives me the moral high ground. That would be moral grandstanding for sure. Being like elevating your emotional intelligence competence as a source of rebuttal. Probably reach a compromise, talk about it. It's like, well, would it be fair to you that you say there are other alternative solutions in which it would take into consideration factors that may decrease the reception of someone you're trying to help by integrating more emotional intelligent factors or solutions? And then that person who is also intellectually inclined would concede some points, you know, consider some other things just to be fair and meet halfway. Those are kind of how you bridge intellectuals. If you have a pious, incompetent person who's emotionally grandstanding already, the idea is the most practical or pragmatic approach is, I see your point, but hear me out. Hear me out here. Let's not try to step too far away from that. Let's say, what if I change this thing? Does that improve your appreciation for an alternative solution? That, you know, you have to take smaller steps. But when it comes to the other end of the spectrum, you can take gigantic steps as long as it's not bold statements. And I think over the course of my streaming stuff, because of the nature of the simplified hustle culture, trending stuff, it's usually bold statements. And I don't think they're wrong or right. I just think it is interesting to see how people react when I point it out to them. Some people think it's insulting and they become defensive. That's telling of the person's personality. Some people are receptive but find it exhausting. That's the second most quality. And then the third is absolutely enthralled, energetic, think it's really great, and give you the impression that they're interested. Never hear from them again. That's the third most common occurrence. And fourth, just someone that's happy, content, took it as inspiration. Still don't hear from them very often, but I can rest assured that that particular person is living their life. Because the most biggest appeal I can have to keeping people here is that they find value that they can still take from me. And that is the thing that gives me value. Not the idea that I want, like, oh, they see the goal of being a friend or being loyal or being emotionally invested or dedicated. No, just if I have something to offer, stay. Take all that can offer to improve your life, whatever it is, inspiration, just a phrase, a vocabulary, do that, and choose never to come back. If you never come back, I know that you've already taken everything that you find valuable from me. And I like to hope you're not coming back because you didn't spiral into a ditch somewhere. That's my naivety, though. I'm being naive that when I don't hear from someone ever again, is that they're living they have other passions to seek, and they are like living in, they found a new found passion or something. That's rarely the case on the internet. They're more like meandering and trying to find something new because they got bored already. That's probably a more realistic thing. But when people leave, it's not sad for me. It's when we part ways, like when I finish teaching a class, it's not bittersweet. It just means they're going off to better opportunities. And what do I get the following year? More opportunities to more people, more challenges to test. It's like a continuous social experiment. Which I saw there's a very popular channel. This guy is literally data mining social experiments, like constructing social experiments using using scripts and bots to test them. I don't have an aptitude for that, but man, that would be really cool. all right. We got to get at least some things